So, as Andrew mentioned, my name's Tony Quinn. I'm from the Offshore Renewable Energy Catapult based in Blyth. So, I am the token representative from the true north at this Northern Powerhouse conference. And my emphasis will be a little bit on the North East. No apologies for that. I will make reference to the opportunities that exist down in the Humber and of course the Northwest. Emma mentioned the scale of the ambition in the sector deal at around about 30 gigawatts by 2030. And she also mentioned that there were various reports that said that that wasn't ambitious enough, particularly the Climate Change Committee report, which says that we need to go much further and much faster. And they talked about 75 gigawatts by 2050. But when you look into the report, really that's just a further ambition sort of scale. If you look to the speculative scenario, that would entail a fourfold increase in electricity demand. And I was at the opening seminar this morning, and there was a little bit of debate about how much of our energy demands electricity really represents. But it's currently at around about 350 terawatt hours per annum, and it could grow to over 1,000 terawatt hours per annum, depending on how much hydrogen supplies the network and how much we electrify, heat and transport. So the opportunity is truly enormous. And our ambition, which Emma mentioned in terms of the sector deal, is to increase UK content. This is really, really important, really something that I'm really passionate about, and that's what the clusters are all about, is how do we get UK content up from an estimated 40-something% at the moment to 60% or beyond. And again, I listened very intently to the CCU panel that you chaired, Andrew, and I guess my concern is that, and these are 2012 prices, by the way, so the 60 and the 67% cost reduction. I think Emma mentioned 40-odd% pre-last CFD round. I guess my concern is that everybody's attention is moving on to the next challenge. How do you decarbonise heat? How do you decarbonise transport? And there's a lot of sort of conceptual thinking going on about how we might do that. It's at a very nascent stage where offshore wind is really at the industrialisation phase. We're populating the North Sea with hundreds of turbines. We're investing billions of pounds in this infrastructure that Emma also mentioned. How, as the UK, do we genuinely take advantage of that opportunity? So this is good news, right? But by no means is a job done. I think there's a lot of work to be done to realise £40 per megawatt hour. But even when we realise that, there's still work to be done in terms of continuous improvement. The reason that the backbone of our electricity network, in terms of originally coal, now combined cycle, and future to be wind, is that we eked out gradual and incremental improvement in both performance and operation and maintenance. And that's very much where I feel the next phase of offshore wind will take us. And where do our grand challenges exist? Well, I've broken it down just for simplicity into 4 key areas. Turbines will continue to get bigger and capture more economies of scale through being bigger. We're currently testing one blade at 107-metre length for the Halyard X machine, and no doubt Ray can talk a little bit about what his organisation is doing in that regard. But there's a lot of work to be done to be bringing bigger turbines to market. I mentioned the backbone of our electricity industry being coal-powered plant at 500 megawatts. That was the backbone, the workhorse of our network when I started my career. And I don't think we're at that backbone or workhorse unit size yet on turbine size. They're continuing to develop, innovate and grow. And of course, how do you tie these turbines as we exploit the more of the shallow water? How do we exploit the deeper water? It's evident that floating wind will become more prevalent. And if you look on the cost reduction curve, we're forecasting as the Catapult that by 2050 or sooner, it will become cost competitive with fixed foundation. Electrical infrastructure, we can't continue to do point-to-point connection. We can't just keep, Emma showed all of the round 4 wind farms, round 3, round 4. At the moment, they're all point-to-point connection. I noticed on August the 9th, when we had a big outage, the first instinctive look was to the offshore wind farm that tripped out, and how was that contributed to the blackout? And in fact, I don't believe it was. But it's interesting, just public perception and public reaction to that. But nevertheless, absorbing 75 gigawatts of offshore wind onto the network means we need to radically think what the electrical infrastructure for this country looks like. And of course, operations and maintenance, that's where we can eke out improvements and then remove manual intervention from the whole process. So Emma said I'd talk a little bit about innovation in these regards, and I will, but it's worth going back, and I'm very conscious that Andrew is an economist, and I will quote Michael Porter on his competitive advantage of nations. And he's talked about how companies achieve advantage, and it's almost exclusively through acts of innovation, and they embrace innovation in its broadest sense, including new technologies and, more importantly, new ways of doing things. And actually, I think the way that the UK can really compete is to find new and better ways of doing the same thing. Innovation manifests itself in many ways in terms of product design, product process, or even new training methodologies. It very often is just mundane and involves incremental changes rather than a big technological breakthrough. But what I really want to emphasize is that it always involves investments in skill and knowledge. And that's really, really fundamental to me on how the UK can leverage its advantage in the market that presents itself. And interesting in terms of what Andrew mentioned when he talked about SMD, it often is transferred from other industries, and I think the position that our country has in terms of its expertise in exploiting oil and gas from the North Sea presents a great opportunity in that regard. So the importance of clusters, it's worth, again, coming back to Porter, what do we mean by a cluster? It's a geographic concentration of interconnected firms, service providers, related firms associated in particular fields. There are 4 ingredients, really, to create a successful cluster. One is demand, and quite clearly it's 75 gigawatts or 30 gigawatts, however you wish to position it. We've got the demand right on our doorstep. It also talks about having the necessary skills and infrastructure, and by that I go as far as the universities and the expertise that we have in this field. It talks about having a supply chain from ready-made or transferable skills from similar industries, which I've already mentioned that we've got in oil and gas. And this is sort of an updated infographic, Emma, on the clusters. And Emma mentioned the Solent, for example. What this tries to do is look at these geographic regions and what is their unique selling point. And so if you look at the North East, it will talk a lot about subsea innovation. It will talk about innovation and incubation, which is where the catapults fit in. and it will talk not about fabrication. And interestingly, that's what's picked out in the Solent as one of their unique selling points is fabrication, but in fact their expertise is in composite technology and transferring boat building expertise into building wind turbines. And it's about this transfer of expertise that I think really presents its opportunity in offshore wind, particularly in wind turbines. You can continue to make a 100-metre blade in a very labour-intensive process. Automation will obviously come into play at some point, and no doubt new materials, additive manufacturing will play a part. Can continue to forge a 5.5-metre diameter bearing using traditional manufacturing techniques, because we're pushing the boundaries of metallurgy and crystalline technology as we understand it. So new materials, new ways of doing things will need to be found. And if you look at the North East cluster in particular, I've tried to just group the firms that are already operating in this space. And my attention is particularly in the bottom right, subsea innovation, and you'll see, Andrew, that SMD are in there, but so are Modus, who are based in the Northeast, and Osbit, who are a very innovative engineering firm, IHC. These are all fantastic firms with a great engineering heritage, with subsea expertise, that are ready to take advantage of the opportunity that North offshore wind presents. And coming down to the Humber, clearly I'm based in Blythe. That's where the largest wind turbine test facilities in the world exist. But the Catapult is also establishing a presence in this region too. Only today we've announced that our intention to set up this operations and maintenance centre and set up some expertise in this area. Why? Because Humber is really geographically well positioned to take advantage of offshore wind in the North Sea. But also because this is where a lot of the challenges exist, and where a lot of new technologies can be used to reduce manual intervention and introduce things like artificial intelligence, robotics, and autonomous systems. And we're already trialling a lot of new ideas and new concepts and new products in this area, and it's great to be located alongside companies like Ørsted, who are also establishing a presence of around about 300 or 400 people, I guess, in this area. So this is the opportunity that is presented us today. I mentioned earlier that I felt the key factors for success were academic excellence, skilled labour, infrastructure, and intellect. And I couldn't not mention the wealth of capability that we've got in our universities. In the North East, where we've got a really close collaboration between Newcastle, Northumbria and Durham. They were recently successful with a renewable energy doctoral centre with 65 doctoral graduates to come out over the next 5 years. I think 13 a year, something like that. I know Hull has been similarly successful with another doctoral centre. And it's also worth mentioning the colleges. Newcastle College in particular is really emphasising the dip in students at level 4 and level 5, or what you might call an advanced apprenticeship, and solely really targeting our skills agenda at them is really, really important, because to create 27,000 jobs or even more, we need to make sure that the skills agenda is closely matched to those needs of industry. And it's worth pointing out, of course, that in this region, ORE are a key part of that academic landscape, and also the leaders of the cluster in this region. I want to mention very specifically the North East Catalyst, Energy Catalyst, which Collaboration has been mentioned many, many times this morning and this afternoon already, and there's been a sort of hint that we're not really good at collaborating. This is a great initiative pulled together by our LEP to try and bring together all of the intellectual and physical infrastructure assets of the North East under one umbrella with a common mission. And it's really good because it pulls me together with our assets, with Newcastle University and SESI with their integrated systems infrastructure, and also Northern Gas Networks with their integral assets and their push to drive towards a hydrogen economy. Brings us all together, start to work thinking how are we going to treat the decarbonisation of our economy in the full system perspective. And it's really important, this, because this shows how you can get a really positive intervention from local government, the LEP, the Tees Valley LEP, and North of Tyne Combined Authority to try and pull us together. And finally, I just wanted to mention the Offshore Wind Growth Partnership. This was going to be Sophie's mantra, and indeed Ray may well pick this up. But this is another intervention by the Offshore Wind Industry Council to try and support industry or UK companies to enter into the UK market by helping them to become more competitive, more productive, and introduce more innovation. And essentially, they are the benefits that a cluster delivers: more innovation, higher productivity, and an increased volume of new startups. Thank you very much.